Hello, I'm Don Mitchell. Thanks for taking a look at this video in which I again return to the 2000% Solution, the book that teaches you how to accomplish at least 20 times more with the same or less time, effort, and resources. This time we're looking at Chapter 11, Identify the Future Best Practice and Measure it. I think the chapter speaks for itself as far as it goes, so I want to add on a few observations that aren't located there that may help those of you who are a bit puzzled by this task. First of all, I was reminded by something that Peter Drucker once said to me as we sat in his living room in Claremont, California. Peter said, Don, the problem with business is that people have no imagination. And he went on to provide lots of examples of that, ones that I don't have time to share with you today. But I think there's, underneath his comment, there's not only a lot of truth, but I think there's an underlying cause. And the underlying cause is the fact that people don't have enough curiosity. So in crafting this step of the 2000% solution, step 3, I think what we are now dealing with is a substitute for the curiosity that hopefully people had. And I hope that one of the side benefits of engaging in these tasks will be that you will develop more curiosity because you'll find how fascinating it is to learn about how people do things extraordinarily well. I was thinking of an example of this just over the weekend. I had the opportunity to hear a concert. And one of the reasons I decided to attend the concert was because it contained circus acts. You might be thinking, why would a concert contain circus acts? Well, I had the same question, so I was curious at how the two had been integrated. While I was there, I was more than fascinated by the fact that the music and the performances were coordinated. So it was much like a situation where I watched a movie of action that was going on, and the music to the movie perfectly accentuated what was happening on the screen. Except in this case, these performers were dangling high in the air where it was hard to miss them. So the intensity of the experience was quite immense for me, even though I was sitting pretty far back. However, I would notice something that was very interesting. Uh, the first act was just stunning. A woman came out and she did all kinds of acrobatic things, hanging from her legs and her toes and everything else you could hang from. But at a key point in her act, she pulled out what resembled a violin and began to play a solo with very high quality of what was being performed. So naturally, I assumed it was some sort of a fake. So I looked down to the orchestra, who was actually playing this? Nobody was playing in the violin section. I looked up, I said, that sound is definitely coming from her. So I quickly pulled up in the program and I noticed that she had once attended the Juilliard School, which is one of the great performing arts preparation schools in the world for violinists. And she, in fact, had won many violin competitions. So immediately I was fascinated. How in the world did somebody master being a great violin player and becoming essentially an acrobat, doing extremely dangerous and difficult tasks? Now, did I mention, by the way, that she could play these excellent tunes while hanging from her legs upside down? So it was pretty amazing. As during the intermission, I turned to the people around me and asked them what they thought of the act. They were truly fascinated. And I asked them how they thought it had happened. And they all said, oh, she must come from a circus family. Well, there was nothing in her biography that suggested that. So I immediately became fascinated and took home the information so I could do more research on her. Everyone else was satisfied to just make an assumption about that. Now, I think this anecdote perfectly characterizes why we need to search out the future best practice. Most people are assuming that they're doing a great job, when in fact, they're doing a horrible job compared to the potential. But they're measuring themselves compared to the past or what the budget is and so forth. And those things will make even the worst performer look good. So instead, we need to have a broader perspective, and we need to have a substitute for the curiosity that some people have, but most people don't have. So let me tie into this example of the circus performer who could play the violin upside down to another point. In this chapter, we talk a lot about a manufacturing example. However, if we were to move over into the service area, I think we would have focused on some slightly different things that are also important to manufacturers. So I'd like to sort of, focus in on that for a moment. Two things that are quite significant in service businesses that are less significant in manufacturing ones. The first is that more often is critical who you hire. In other words, if you are in a situation where you're face to face with customers all day long, those people who are face to face had better be pretty friendly, nice to be with, and genuinely helpful in terms of how they like to interact with people. If you have a bunch of sourpusses instead, you're not going to get very good results. Yet many people, while they know that, would have no idea how to recruit the people who, despite the difficulties and challenges of a long, tough day face to face with the public, will continue to operate in the right way. Second, even the most personable person is going to need to learn some new things. So what are the best ways to learn those new things and to always do them instead of whatever old habits the person brings to the job? Well, that's something that you can learn in a variety of ways. So let's assume you need people who are real superstars, people who can dazzle a TED audience, for example. That's the organization that features online presentations that sometimes get millions of views on YouTube. Um, or perhaps you just need someone who's a minimum wage person, but can really do an excellent job. Well, if you're looking for the superstar, you'd probably go to some place like the Metropolitan Opera. And I've long studied them because I've been very fascinated by the way they've transformed the opera world over the last 10 years or so. And one of the ways they've done that is that they have not only produced ever more elaborate and fascinating sets, but they've also brought a theatricality to opera that wasn't always present prior to the last decade. And one of the ways they've done that is by bringing in people from Broadway, people who normally put on productions that rely on acting. And as a result, the people who often perform at the Met in the lead roles are people whose acting is at least as good, in some cases better, than their singing. Whereas many years ago, it would have been the singing quality, and the person would have stood there woodenly. And I've done quite a bit of thinking and asking and learning about how they've attracted this new generation with a different set of skills. The second thing is I had the great good fortune to actually visit the Disney organization a number of years ago, find out how they take minimum wage workers, or people often paid not much more than minimum wage, at least initially, and turn them into outstanding performers on stage. And in the course of doing that, from both of these experiences, I've learned things that actually could be applied to the other organization. And I encourage you to do the same thing. Now, it may not be easy. I know in the early days of when I was learning a lot about how you can hire terrific people and make them even more effective, I had a hard time finding anyone who knew anything about it or actually performed well in that area. So you're going to probably, in some cases, have to do quite a bit of searching. And you might say, but Don, how am I going to find time to do all this searching? Well, think about it. If you are actually going to upgrade the most important thing that you or your organization does, wouldn't it be worth learning how to do it extremely well? So if you don't have that kind of commitment, there's really something wrong with you. You must not care about your customers, or you must not care about yourself. And really sit back and think about that. Think how exciting this can be as an adventure, a chance to learn things that perhaps no one else has ever learned before. Let's step back and talk about the psychology of this as well. We're going to be doing some work that is going to be closer to Peter Drucker's comment about people have no imagination. We're going to give you a framework to have more imagination, and hopefully you'll be extremely effective in doing that. But before we do that, we have to raise your sights. I mean, if you're down there thinking about how great you are, how great your organization is, compared to some really lousy operation or some really ineffective person you just bumped into, boy, you've got your head in the sand. And you have a false pride, and that false pride can get you into a lot of trouble. For example, over the years, when I've asked executives, how well does this aspect of what you do compare to what everyone else does? The answer I receive about 90% of the time is, oh, ours is much better. Yet, when I actually go out and measure the results, I find that in 90% of the cases, the performance is no better, and in almost all cases, actually much worse than the average. That's right, much worse than the average. Yet these people think they're doing a great job. Well, that just shows how easily satisfied they are with poor results. That's a key problem. If we go back to my initial comments about why the 2000% solution is so important, it takes on average anywhere from 400 to 1,000 years from the time someone somewhere on Earth learns how to do something and begins telling other people about it before the majority of all people are using whatever it is. Even if there's no investment involved, no technology, no resources needed. So why is that? Well, people are very easily satisfied. And why are they very easily satisfied? Well, our brains are structured in such a way that we easily form habits. If we just repeat doing something about 30 times, that becomes a habit. And without consciously thinking about it, we will repeat that. I was very aware of that many years ago when I didn't go to Boston very often from my home in the suburbs. But when I did go, it was to go to church. And so on the rare occasions when I needed to go to Boston for some other reason, I'd find myself right in front of the church instead of my destination because I hadn't bothered to think about where I was going. I just driven automatically to church. So that's what the case in my error here is an error that gets repeated in important activities that do need to be improved all the time. So the fact that you're studying these methods, the fact that you then begin to apply these methods can jolt you out of those habits of being complacent about what's going on and cause you, in fact, to look for really something much better. So let me give you, another perspective, which is you can't hope to begin to have useful imagination about what's really possible until you know what people are already doing. Because otherwise, your imagination will be used to reinvent the equivalent of the wheel, something that people have known about for hundreds of years. And I see this all the time. In my role for many years as an active book reviewer of business books, I never received a book, not once, that explained an idea or a way to implement it that hadn't been published, written about, and applied broadly for at least 50 years. Yet people, and dynamically would do this. This is the cutting edge. This is absolutely the latest thing. All they're really doing was shouting from the rooftops, I have no idea what's the best way to do this thing, but I'm going to tell you this loudly and hope you'll believe it. And the fact that in some cases millions of people actually bought these books tells me that the readers had equally subject really to the same issue. Of course, I continue to expect as a result that it will be somewhere between 400 to 1,000 years from now before the average person will be using this 8-step process that you're learning today. So just think how far in advance you are of the rest of the world. So keep up the good work. As you apply this, I hope you'll do well. and keep looking at for that future best practice and measuring it. So goodbye for now.